The House will come to order. Members, today let us bow our heads for a few moments of silent reflection in our own personal traditions. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. It's not a cardboard cutout or a wax statue. Hey, how are you? Thanks for letting me gavel us in. Thanks for being here. Delighted to do it.
Morning. Oh, got my mic on.
The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 93rd Session, 2023, 72nd day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Wednesday, May 17th, 2023.
If there's no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor and into the alcoves or the retiring room or the rotunda. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 3328 through 3330.
First reading House Files 3328 through 3330. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate file number 37. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading of Senate File number 37, an act relating to state government. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Conference Committee reports on House files.
Conference Committee report on House File number 2310, an act relating to state government appropriating money for environment and natural resources. The report is addressed to the Honorable Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the House, and the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File 2310, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 5 of the 5 members on the part of the House and 4 of the 5 members on the part of the Senate. Hansen moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2310 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the maker of the motion, the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to explain the report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This report is the same as yesterday, with the exception of Section 29 on page 167 has been removed. So that is the report. I'd ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion to the Conference Committee report and its adoption for House File 2310? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on House File 10, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File number 2310 as amended by conference.
Third reading is amended by conference. Discussion to the Conference Committee report on House File 2310 as amended by conference. I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I will admit, just getting in here, and I thought a lot about the environment bill yesterday, the environment and energy bill, but I'm glad to see many provisions that would have been harmful to future job creation in our state removed from this bill. This bill does a lot that Minnesotans will benefit from, and I'm sure there's going to be other members who speak to that today. But members, one of the things that I most sincerely care about in this state is creating a regulatory environment that has humility and that enhances job creation, job growth, new investment in our state from the private sector. And one of the most concerning provisions for me within this Conference Committee report, within the Environment, Natural Resources, and Energy Omnibus Bill, is the cumulative impact analysis. And I want to tell a little bit of a story over the history of our state and a reason why the way that this bill is currently written isn't going to serve our state very well. So the city of Duluth, the port city of Duluth, has been a key economic hub since its creation. And ever since, there were boats moving across the St. Lawrence Seaway and across the Great Lakes as they arrived to the city of Duluth, where we created a port for the things, for the products, the natural resources that we have such a great amount of in our state. We have sent those resources from the port city of Duluth across the St. Lawrence Seaway, across the Great Lakes, to the oceans and across the world, enhancing trade for our state and creating what has been a major manufacturing hub for our state that has benefited our economy. It grew the city of Duluth. It was born out of that industrial revolution a full century ago. But now, members, with the cumulative impacts analysis, the permitting requirements that are being put into place by this law, the future of industrial development in that city and across the 7-county metro area will be significantly hampered and hindered. And it doesn't have to be this way. If we brought more humility to the environmental permitting system for air, for water, for odor, we can see greater investment in our state. We want strong industrial jobs. The industrial jobs that I'm talking about provide family-sustaining pay and wealth for our state. The average starting job in mining today is around $90,000 a year for one person to work in mining. And that's the starting wage, meaning they very quickly grow. The port city of Duluth was once home to U.S. Steelworks, Gary New Duluth. And that left 40 years ago, I believe in 1982, in part because of the additional costly regulatory burden that our state has as compared to other places in our country and the world. And what we are doing here with the cumulative impacts analysis for the city of Duluth will directly impact future development. Because now, when someone wants to develop in the city of Duluth, permitting timelines are likely to be double what they currently are. So while we have incredible natural resources and several ports, just like St. Paul is a port city, Duluth is a port city, meaning they are incredible hubs for great jobs. But those great jobs will not be developed here because of this bill, because of the cumulative impacts analysis in this bill. And I'm very concerned about it. For the Minnesotans who have tuned in this morning, I hope that this is talked about more in the coming weeks, months ahead. Because over the last several years, we have seen numerous different instances of investors and businesses wanting and seeking to come to our state because of the incredible, and amazing natural resources that are so diverse that there is nowhere else in North America where you can find them. But with a bill that contains this cumulative impact analysis, future investment in our state will not be made. And so when I hear members of this body on either side of the aisle say, Well, Minnesota doesn't get those jobs, and we don't do, for example, steel processing. Or when we aren't developing and processing the future resources for clean energy, copper, nickel, and everything that goes into making solar panels and wind turbines. The reason that investment isn't made in our state is because of language like the cumulative impact analysis. Just in the last year, I believe in the last 365 days, 2 separate investing companies have chosen to do this elsewhere, whether in the Dakotas or in the Southeast United States. This is real life. This is facts. And it's not just future development or the companies who have yet to invest in our state. But with the way that the cumulative impact analysis is currently designed for the 7-county metro area and for quote-unquote environmental justice areas that are tied to the American Indian communities in our state, businesses that currently have permits in our state and are doing the work, as they seek to grow, and as we all know, as businesses seek to grow, they must grow in order to remain competitive. But with the cumulative impact analysis as currently written in this bill, they won't make that investment in our state, and they will go somewhere else, meaning we will lose out on those jobs, those high-paying jobs for communities in our state that aren't seeing the benefit of high-paying jobs. I understand that there is a need to respond to community over certain aspects to health and wellness. But there is a equal need to ensure that communities, especially in northern Minnesota, aren't left behind. For 40 years, the city of Duluth has not grown. The city of Duluth has declined in population as additional burdens for regulatory growth or regulatory humility have been placed upon job creators in our state. That's why I'm disappointed today. That's why I'll be voting no today, in addition to a lot of what you will hear from my colleagues. If we wanted to say that certain businesses couldn't operate in our state, then this could have been done in a better way, with a lot more regulatory humility. But the concern is that businesses will leave and flee this state, leaving the jobs behind. Hundreds of jobs, good-paying, family-sustaining jobs in the most beautiful part of our state, where responsible industry and the environment can work hand in hand. But this bill says no to industrial development in the 7-county metro area and communities in major regional centers and any community tied to one of our American Indian communities. It's wrong. It's sad. And members, we must recognize the role that our state plays in the future of energy, in the future of electric vehicles, in the future that so many members of this chamber care so deeply about as it relates to reducing the impacts of carbon. And if we care about those things, then members shouldn't be placing additional restrictions upon the ability for the minerals to be developed here in Minnesota, where we have the strongest environmental standards, the strongest labor standards anywhere in the world. When you say no to these jobs, when you say no to this investment, it is chased out of this state and to places, members, in other communities, countries, and foreign adversarial nations. Where they don't have environmental protections, where they haven't done the work like generations of legislators have here in Minnesota. That's what this bill does. I can't vote for it. I won't vote for it. Because the future of our state and the jobs and economic development is too important across so many industries. Let's stand for jobs. Let's stand for economic development. Let's stand for the highest environmental and labor standards going to work to employ Minnesotans without placing the heavy burden that doubles the permitting timeline for any project. From a hospital to a manufacturing facility to a mine that will develop the minerals that we need to advance a cleaner future. We can do this work better. We should have done this work better. And I'll be voting no on this bill.
Further discussion on the repassage of House File 2310 as amended by conference. I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Schultz, for walking through some of the challenges that we're facing in this bill. In the tradition of yesterday's debate and discussion, I'll lead out with a quick comment. I recall from let's just say a terrific film. Are there any rocks ahead in this bill? Yes. Yeah, there's rocks ahead. And it's going to be devastating to many of the folks that Representative Schultz was describing, those that depend on those jobs for their livelihoods here in Minnesota. But there's a lot to talk about here today. A lot of the things that I appreciate about this particular bill, quite honestly, is the items that were dropped that were originally included, that Minnesota Democrats in the House pushed and very easily could have been moving through this process today, things like the Lowland Conifer Carbon Reserve Program. I understand, Representative Purcell, what you were after, and I think that while there may be those that were well-meaning with this with this bill, the impacts were certainly in question. It's out of the bill. We talked extensively about fee increases that were proposed in the House DFL bill. State park entrance fee increases, fishing license fee increases, hunting license fee increases. I'm thankful those things aren't in the bill. A number of members will probably join us in the discussion and talk about some of the fee increases that are in the bill. But thankfully, those things I just mentioned are out. A ban on wolf hunting, which is, when you really get down to brass tacks, that's management of wolves in Minnesota. That's how we protect other species impacted by overpopulations. Might not be something that you see in southern Minnesota, Chair Hansen, but in other parts of the state, there is an overabundance of wolves, and we need management. The swan protection areas was a nice term. I think that was catchy, but ultimately the impact was a ban on some tackle, which, if that's what we want to do, let's talk about that. I'm glad that's out of this bill today. Now, that being said, unfortunately, this bill has some real clunkers, in spite of the provisions that were removed. The overall spending is huge, historic, as Chair Hansen termed it, but let's just think about that for a minute. That's great. If you have a project that you want, that's fine, but Democrats are spending the surplus, and in many cases, I would categorize that as squandering in many of these provisions. And Representative Tabke and I have had a long discussion about the Lawns to Legumes program, which I've described as lawns to weeds in many cases. That's not just me, that's in news stories that I've cited on the floor that have pointed out that this is really hard. People have a hard time implementing the work that it takes to actually produce the product that's desired. And it's expensive, $4 million. In some parts of the state, the Lawns to Legumes program has been prohibited in certain jurisdictions because a lot of places people don't like that look in their community because, like I said, it's hard, and it usually, at least according to some of these news stories, results in something less than a pollinator-friendly habitat that resembles something more of what I described to begin with, weeds. Money that we could be using to eliminate Social Security tax in Minnesota is being spent in this bill. Another example that I mentioned earlier, I'll mention again today. I'm glad the amount was reduced, but we're still giving $16.5 million to district energy. When we're supposed to work out an agreement with Xcel. What that means, members, and those watching at home, is that Minnesota taxpayers are subsidizing energy in St. Paul. Why are we doing that? We're spending, another subject area, I guess this one really caught me off guard. I thought it was noteworthy. The number isn't as big as the Lawns to Legumes program, Representative Tabke, but $186,000 to study flying squirrels, members. Seriously. $186,000 to fund flying squirrels. I am going to talk again about a couple of things that I do like about the bill. Things that things that I think most Minnesotans can appreciate, and I believe deserves recognition. $35 million for boat access improvement. Infrastructure in many of these areas where we're trying to access Minnesota lakes isn't in the best of shape. And those with boats, and Representative Doubt referenced yesterday, I believe 836,000 boats in Minnesota, the highest per capita boat ownership of anywhere in the country. Higher than Florida, higher than California. People need to be able to access Minnesota waters. And if you have a boat access that is in disrepair, that can be a real problem. It can damage your boat. And then you have long lines of people trying to navigate a boat access that can, in some cases, be almost inaccessible. Thankfully, there's money in this bill. Democrats listened on this issue, and we got a significant investment in boat accesses. There's also money for fish hatcheries. Not as much as we were hoping. A lot of groups have been advocating for fish hatcheries to be improved in Minnesota. And thankfully, there's $10 million in this bill to support that effort. Again, crumbling infrastructure. I don't know how many folks in the chamber have toured a hatchery in Minnesota, but they're in disrepair. Hopefully we can continue to work on this subject area and make an investment in fish hatcheries, but it's a good start. So that's great. I appreciate that investment. I really do. But alongside those good provisions, there's also, which I think I referenced briefly earlier, the boat registration fee increases. We have an nearly $18 billion surplus, and the example that I mentioned in the first discussion when this bill came forward, I'm going to mention again today. If you have a 19-foot boat, you're going to be paying almost 130% more for that boat registration. 130%. That's a jump, if I ever saw one. And that's at a time when we have decreasing, I think Representative Garofalo has mentioned this a number of times on the floor, decreasing disposable income in the pockets of Minnesotans. They have less money to cover these increased fees, Representative Hansen. But you're raising their fees for boat registration in some categories by up to 130%, if I'm reading that correctly. I hope I'm not, but I think that I got the information correct. I've mentioned a camp in my district, Camp Confidence. If I'm reading the language right in this boat registration fee area, in some of the categories for the smaller watercraft, we're going up 75%, even for camps, nonprofit organizations. And I hope I got that wrong, but if I'm reading the bill correctly, it looks like Camp Confidence is going to be seeing fee increases for paddle boards, canoes, all of those things that kids come to camp and want to play and use. And they don't just have one or two of these things. They have, in some cases, dozens and dozens. Representative Schultz was very strongly advocating against these complicated policy changes for permitting. Yeah, it's a 7-county metro, but this is Minnesota. We have the highest standards in most of these issues in the subject areas when it comes to permits of almost anywhere in the world. And we need those high standards, I agree. But unfortunately, some of these changes that are in this bill, and the MPCA commissioner authority that is increased in this bill. And quite honestly, as I'm reading it, Representative Hansen, there's a number of instances where I can't tell what authority the commissioner and MPCA may have in a certain subject area. It sounds like through a rulemaking process that's yet to be determined in some cases, how some of these things will be done and what authority the MPCA commissioner has is ambiguous. I can't tell exactly what we're getting at in some of these, and we can probably talk about that later. Hopefully we can get some clarification. My biggest concern with so many of these provisions is that when those folks that are providing great opportunities for Minnesotans, high-paying jobs, I'm worried that many of those folks are going to be looking elsewhere. I'm sure many of the members in the chamber today can give examples of businesses that are looking to find a state that's more hospitable. I know what, very near to my own district, we've been talking about ore being transported out of state because we want batteries, we want electric vehicles, we want electric bikes, and so on and so forth. But that technology requires mineral development. But we can't do that here in Minnesota where we have high standards. We're going to other states, and Representative Franzen has talked about some of those places outside of the country we're going to for minerals because we don't develop them here. And the environment provisions were dumped together with the bad energy bill. These two things coupled together, this shouldn't be done. We should be able to work on these two subject areas as one individual subject area. Environment separate from energy. So unfortunately, I'll be a no vote on the bill today. And Mr. Speaker, if it's in order, I would move to reconsider the motion to adopt the conference to not adopt the conference committee report. Excuse me, to adopt the conference committee report, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Heinzman, your motion is in order. So Representative Heinzman moves that the vote whereby the report on the conference committee on House File 2310 that was adopted earlier today be now reconsidered. Discussion to the Heinzman motion. I recognize the maker of the motion, the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm glad that in earlier discussion yesterday, a motion, we were able to walk things back a little bit. There was rulemaking that was added after having not been heard in the House or not been heard in the Senate, and it showed up in the conference committee report. And I'm glad that that language was removed. I'm seeing, though, that the dollars that were there for that expedited rulemaking process are still in the bill. And I think that that should be addressed. That is my suggestion, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the motion to reconsider. I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. Seems like we had a little speedy process here this morning. It's my understanding that the majority party told the minority party we were going to go to caucus. And then all of a sudden we're on passage of this bill after they sped through an adoption of the conference committee report with no discussion. And I'll just remind folks that everybody gets a little tired, everybody gets a little irritable in the final few days of session. But I assure you, as our speaker knows as well, that the best remedy is always to stop, take a deep breath, and lower the temperature. And unfortunately, I think we've missed the opportunity to do that. So this motion will allow us to just stop, take a deep breath, think about whether we want to have a steamroller here or whether we want to have discussion on these bills. Because, frankly, it's the last day of session according to your resolution. I think we all know that this isn't the last day of session. And I think we all have figured out now that you're going to need everybody in this chamber to participate in helping this session get done on time. And I think I shouldn't need to remind you that everybody on this side of the aisle also represents 43,500 Minnesotans who care an awful lot about what's going on at the Capitol. And the one thing that needs to be consistent here is your word. And if you tell us you're going to break to go to caucus, and then all of a sudden there's a steamroller, you can do that because you have the votes to do that. But if you treat us like that, and I know you know it's wrong, if you're going to lie to us, then the relationship's not going to be very good between now and the end of session. And the people who you need to help you get this session done on time and land this plane without crashing it aren't going to be very willing to help you. So I would think very carefully about this process of moving forward so quickly without giving the minority, I know you've cut us out of conference committees. You don't want our voice in conference committees. This makes it look like you don't even want our voice here on the House floor. And while I don't take personal offense to that, the 43,500 people that I represent back in my district actually care if I'm involved. And they want their voice to be heard here at the Capitol. So it's pretty important that you treat everybody in this chamber with respect and with dignity. And our voices are no less important just because we don't have 3 more members in this chamber. So members, I would ask that you vote in favor of this motion to reconsider the adoption, and let's have the discussion that we should have had, and let's not disrespect the minority in the way that you are grossly disrespecting them today. And I think if the speaker was actually here, she'd probably say, you know what, maybe this is one of those moments. She came to that realization a couple of times last week when things got a little, the temperature got a little high here in the chamber. And I think if she was here, she'd say, why don't we take a deep breath and go to caucus for a little bit. Mr. Speaker, I'd request a roll call on this motion.
Representative Dowd requests a roll call vote. Seeing well over 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote on the motion. Anything further, Representative Dowd?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also move a recess to the call of the chair for approximately 30 minutes.
Representative Dowd moves
And I'd request a roll call on that motion.
Representative Dowd moves a recess to the call of the chair and has requested a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Is there any discussion to Representative Dowd's motion to recess? Representative Long.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask members to vote no so we can get on with discussing the bill.
All those in favor of Representative Dowd's motion? Oh, that's right. The clerk will take the roll on the motion to recess. The clerk will close the roll.
Now we're in recess.
There being 121 ayes and 6 nays, the motion prevails and the House stands in recess.